Back when I was in college, I had an English literature professor who was from Scotland. And he was teaching us about Shakespeare. And you can imagine what that sounded like in a Scottish accent. Now, the only problem we were able to understand kind of what he was saying, but the other problem he had was not only was he from Scotland, but he spoke very rapidly. It was almost impossible to understand what he was saying or to take notes. And as it came to pass, we learned that every Thursday there was a review class that was led by a teaching assistant who spoke perfect English. So many of us would skip his class and go to the review. So today I want to review what I have preached upon for the last 2 Sundays. Some of you have chosen to come only to the review. We're having a 3-part series on the idea of overcoming sin and how God has helped us with that, and the ways in which He has helped us to overcome sin. You know, the cross is all about the forgiveness of sin, but the Christian life is about overcoming that sin in our life with a capital S. The first of the series I preached upon was the idea that throughout life God touches us by leading us through experiences in which we suffer and then surrender and then resurrect. And that's one of the ways in which God heals us, overcomes the sin in our life, the selfish, egotistical ways in which we hurt others, hurt ourselves, hurt our world. The more we suffer and die and resurrect, the freer we will be from sin. That was the first sermon. The second sermon, which was preached last week, had to do with the idea of how we overcome sin through the experience of leaning on one another. By being part of a community where we come together not to bite each other's back or to gossip about each other or to try to hurt each other, but to come together to serve each other. It's in that serving others that we also overcome sin. Because while we are so busy serving and loving others, there's no room in our hearts for the selfish life. Now, the third message is for today, and that is the message about the power of forgiveness. And how it is that forgiveness is one of God's great tools to help us overcome the desire to be selfish, self-centered, animalistic little creatures living for ourselves. It is one of God's great tools. And so, if we do not understand fully forgiveness, then we are weak in overcoming capital S, sin in our life. So today, I want to focus upon that. With this story, this parable that you heard read from the 18th chapter of Matthew, one of the great stories. Peter comes to Jesus and says, "How many times do I have to forgive my brother or sister?" And he was thinking big. He said, 7 times? And Jesus says to him, "No, 77 times." I had a woman in one of my congregations one time that had a husband named George, and I don't know how many times I heard her say to him, "George, that's number 77. George was kind of straightened up a little bit at that point. Actually, this means more than 77 times. This is the way the ancient Hebrews expressed infinity. 7 was perfect and 77 was infinity. Meaning that if you're going to forgive, you need to learn that this life of forgiving is infinite and unconditional toward all persons. It's not a 1-time or 7-time affair, or not even a 77 literally time affair. It is a whole lifetime affair. And if you're going to walk in the Christian way, then you need to learn how to forgive infinitely all persons in all places and in all times. Well, you might ask the human question, why should I do that? Why should I forgive all these people who have wronged me and hurt me and done all these things? Well, Jesus answered that question with a story, as Jesus often did. Matter of fact, people ask me, where did I get the idea of telling stories in my sermons? I got it from Jesus. He's a better storyteller than I am, but it's still the same idea. Because if you can remember the story, then you can remember the point, you see. And so Jesus tells this story about a man who owed another man 10,000 bags of gold. I don't even think the whole nation of Israel had that much money. But anyway, owed a bunch of money, and he begged mercy from this master, and his master gave him mercy and said, that's great. This is okay. I forgive you. You can forget your debt and go out and live in peace. And so the man was so overjoyed and so filled with happiness that he had been forgiven. He went out and lived in joy until he saw some man that owed him a small amount of money. And he grabs that man, starts choking him and says, when are you going to pay me? When are you going to do this? Blah, 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 blah. Throws him in jail saying, you're going to stay in there until you pay me. And the servant saw that and they went back and told the master. And he was furious about that. Absolutely furious. And so he grabs the man in front of him and says, I forgave you all these debts of yours. And you're out here choking somebody that has a debt against you. And then here comes the punchline of the story. Should you not have forgiven this man in the same way you were forgiven? You see, that's the punchline. And the logic of it is undeniable. That's one of the things I love about the stories of Jesus. When you hear those, you have to say, yeah, that's true. I really should live that way. But don't. But the message is still clear. The message is that God is not against us. The message is that God has forgiven us, that God has accepted us, that God loves each and every one of us, and that He has looked away from our weaknesses. He has looked away from our stupid acts. He has looked away from all the ways we have hurt others and all the ways we have thought we knew what was right when it was wrong. He's looked away from all of that. He does not hold any of that against us, but instead He gives us another chance. He gives us another day. He gives us another life. He gives us this new life. He gives us the chance and the hope and the faith to live again and to live on and not to be weighted down by all the ways in which we have not lived as we should live. That's how God treats us. That's how life treats us. That's the kind of world in which we live. We always have another chance to be better, another chance to do better, another chance to encourage the spirit of love within our hearts, either in this life or in the life to come, because God is a forever loving God, and He does not give up on us. He will not give up on us, regardless of how much we may owe Him because of how we have lived. All of that is forgiven. We have the potential every day of our life to be new, to be better, to be different, to be transformed. And God gives that to us and says, all these things you've done in the past, they are now forgotten. All these things that you have done you should not do, they are all forgotten. It's what you do today and how you live today that's important. We've seen all these storms and we've seen all these people's lives being destroyed by all of that. But in the midst of that, we see people realizing they can rebuild. They have to rebuild. And they have the opportunity to rebuild. This is what life does. It gives us the opportunity to rebuild after all that we had has been destroyed. You see? That's the kind of God we have. And that's the kind of life we live in. And unless we are just totally blind and dumb, we ought to be able to see that. Life is forgiving. God is forgiving. All this universe is forgiving. We live by grace, by mercy. That's how we live. And that's the kind of world in which we live. That's the kind of God we have. And that's the kind of life we have been given. So then, should we not live the same way toward others? If we are given a second chance, third chance, 1500th chance, why not give that to others as well? Why not do that? It's the way of God. It's the way of life. It's the way that we are meant to live, the forgiving life, because it is the way life is. That's why we should engage in it, because we want to be in harmony with life. We want to be in sync with life. And if you want to be in harmony and in sync with life, you need to learn what it's like to live this life of forgiveness, you see. And there it is. It's plain and simple. You don't need to say much more about it. Jesus has laid it out there. Here's how you live. And why does that free us from sin? Well, if your entire life is based upon accepting others as they are, if your entire life is based upon encouraging others to be better, you have no reason to be angry or filled with malice or desiring to hurt them or to do any of the other long list of sinful things that we do, because you have accepted them as they are, and you have accepted them with the encouraging love of God. There's no longer any need for you to sin, and by sin we mean to be harmful and hurtful and mean and cruel to another. No need for it, because you now live in the free life of forgiveness. So there it is. That's why Jesus makes forgiveness such an important part of our life. And it's how we should live. We all know that. I bet there's not a person in this room that does not know that and does not understand that this is how we ought to be. But the sad reality is we still are not that way. We forget it time and time again. Even those of us who worship the Lord and who come here in love, we forget it. And we still want to live these human lives of judgment and condemnation and bitterness and anger and malice and all that stuff. We still want to hold a grudge against people. We still want to hold a grudge against life. We still want to do it. We can't seem to get free from this. It's hard for us to forgive. So today, I want to talk a little bit about two of the great lies that we believe. We actually believe these things. I mean, it's a hardcore, hardwired belief in our human mind. And we got to expose these lies. And we got to understand these lies for what they are. They are lies. You know, Jesus referred to Satan as the father of lies. That's what he called him. And our life is ruined by these lies. And so the gospel comes to preach to us what these lies are and how we should not believe them, but instead believe God's way. The first one I want to speak about, I'd like to illustrate it with a little story. A story that comes from American history. This is a true story. Actually, a true story that took place in the late 1800s in the United States. And many of you may be a little familiar with it. It's the story of the Hatfields and the McCoys from Kentucky and West Virginia. These were real people, and this is a real story. I'm not making this up. You can go back in the history books and look at it. There were two men that were heads of these families. One was Ance Hatfield, and the other was Randall McCoy. And during the Civil War, they fought together on the side of the Confederacy against the Union forces. And they were brothers in battle. They were as close as you could be to one another. They were literally able to love one another in the midst of that battle and to protect one another and to do whatever they can to save one another's life. And they went through many battles together, and they saw a lot of death and destruction. It was a horrible war, and they began to hate it, and they didn't like being a part of it. But the story is this. There came the Battle of Shiloh, the Valley of Shiloh. It was a terrible battle for the Confederate Army. The Union Army had surrounded them on both sides, and they were destroying their right flank and destroying their left flank. And the Hatfield and McCoy team were right in the middle of all of that. And as the Union forces came closer and closer to their position, it became obvious that they either had to surrender or die, because there were just too many Union forces coming at them. And it was at that time that Ance Hatfield said to Randall McCoy, "Tell all of our men in this unit to give me their pistols." They had the 6-shot pistols, and put them in this bag. And so Randall McCoy went and got all the pistols from the men and brought it back to Ance Hatfield. And Ance said, "You men, run for the hills. I'll stay and fight the Union." And so Ance McCoy stood on the ridge with those pistols and shot and shot and shot and shot and shot and kept the Union forces from destroying or moving forward to kill these men who'd now run for the hills. And that night around the campfire, as all the men were gathered and Ance Hatfield was not there, they figured, well, he must have died in the battle. The Union must have killed him. And they were all sad because he had saved their lives. Randall McCoy realized that he had saved their lives. And all the men had remembered how many times he had saved their lives and how many times Randall McCoy had saved his life. And they were all remembering that. And it was the time of them to give honor to who they assumed was dead. And that was Ance Hatfield. But later that night, Ance Hatfield came walking into camp. He had managed to sneak away and hide in the woods. And he was alive. Oh, and Randall McCoy was so happy to see him. And they hugged each other, and they were so close and so celebrating about the fact that he was still alive and that he had saved all the other men in that group. And they were just having a great time of celebration. And after that was over, Ance Hatfield said, well, I want to tell you, Randall, I'm done with war. I killed so many men on that ridge, I can't sleep forever. I'm done with war. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of it. I do not want to fight anymore. Now, Randall McCoy tried to convince him, stay, you must stay. It's our cause. You must fight with us. And Ance Hatfield said, no. I'm leaving tonight. I'm going back to my family. I'm going to be a farmer, and never again will I get engaged in something like this war. And so he gets on his horse, and Randall McCoy says to him, Ance, you know this is desertion. You know what the penalty for desertion is. You are to be shot right now. You cannot leave us. You cannot do this. This is desertion, and forever your soul will be condemned to hell, he said. And Ance Hatfield said, I'm sorry. I got to do what I got to do. And he left. And as he was leaving, the story says that Randall McCoy picked up his long gun and started to shoot him in the back as he was leaving. But then he remembered with tears in his eyes how many times this man had saved his life. So he let him go. And as the story goes on, Randall McCoy stayed with his unit, and they fought valiantly in that war. And at one battle, they were fighting, and they were all almost killed. The whole brigade was killed, and Randall McCoy was arrested and thrown into the prisoner of war camp, which was not a nice place to be. And he stayed there and suffered for 2 long years and thought about how it was that his one-time good friend, Ance Hatfield, had left him and these men to die. And so it began to grow in his heart. I can't forgive him for that. I can't forgive him for deserting us. Desertion is wrong. I don't care what army you're fighting in. I don't care who you're going up against. If you desert, you deserve to die. That's all there is to it. It's the rule of humanity. You can't desert the army you're fighting with, or you will die. And so it just grew in Randall McCoy's heart. Well, after the war, he was finally released from prison, and he went back to the area where they both lived. And when he got there, he saw that Ance Hatfield had prospered, that he had started cutting timber, and that he was beginning to build a great business doing that. Because he had 2.5 years to work on that, because he snuck away in the middle of the night and left his men to die. And so Randall McCoy began to get really, really angry in his heart. And he said, I don't even want to say hi to my old friend. He is a deserter. He deserved to die. And in the story, it goes on that they had a confrontation. And in that confrontation, they fought with each other. And Ance Hatfield said to him, Randall, you know I had to do what was right. And Randall said to him, no, Ance, you know I had to do what was right. And then that's when their relationship totally busted apart. And from that day forward, they swore vengeance against each other. And their families began to fight with one another. This is actually a true story. These 2 families, one in Kentucky and one in West Virginia, began to fight with one another and to steal things from one another and to hurt one another. And it just got worse and worse and worse. But they felt justified because the McCoys felt like they had done what was right, and the Hatfields felt like they had done what was right. And as it goes along, Ance Hatfield loses his brother, 3 of his sons, loses 5 or 6 of his uncles to death. Same with Randall McCoy. He loses not only 2 children, he loses all of his children killed in a fire that was set by the Hatfields. And it just goes on and bloody violence until at last Randall McCoy loses his wife, and Ance Hatfield's wife also goes crazy because of all the loss that she has suffered. The 2 families just disintegrate and dissolve into history of bitterness and hate and anger toward each other. That's a true story. It's a true story from human history. And the point of the story is this: what caused these 2 men not to be able to forgive each other? What caused them not to be able to accept each other's weaknesses and failures? What caused it? Each man believed he was right. And in fact, both men were right. One should not engage in war, and one should not desert one's fellow soldiers. Both were exactly right. They were so right, you couldn't argue against either one of them. Both of them was right. But this is our human predicament. We value being right. We are raised in this world, and it says to us, the only thing that matters is that you do what is right. And everybody believes that. Everybody in the human community says, I believe I should do what is right. But God says to us as plainly and clearly as He can, being right is not as important as being righteous. Let me say that one more time. Being right is not as important as being righteous. And by righteous I mean being like God. Being the one who turns the other cheek. You know, Jesus tells that when somebody hits you on the cheek, you turn the other cheek. Well, when they hit me on the cheek, I say to them, that's a wrong thing to do. I'm right to hit you back on the cheek. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That's right. Well, it may be right, but it's not righteous, you see. We are called to hear a higher truth. And the higher truth is that love is always greater than being right. I'll say it once again. Love is always better than being right. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. But we have to get past this lie, this untruth that says to us, if I'm right, I can do whatever I want, say whatever I want, be whatever I want to be, because I'm right. The question is not, are you right, but are you righteous? That's the real question. Which is to say, are you attempting to live the life of God in you? Are you attempting to live as your Heavenly Father would live? Are you attempting to live as life has treated you? Do you understand that being as God is greater than being right? You've got to give that up. Oh, I pray daily, I hope daily that the human race one day will understand that being right is probably the worst thing we have ever decided is a good thing. How many wars have been started because I'm right, you're wrong? How many broken relationships have been broken because one believed they were right and the other believed they were right? How many times do we have to see the suffering and the misery and all the darkness that is caused because we believe this lie of Satan, that it's better to be right than to be like God? Oh, there it is. That's one reason why we can't forgive others. It's because we are under the darkness of this lie that it's better to be right than to be like God. I hope everyone here today can begin to understand that whenever you're confronted with a choice between being right and being like God, you will make the good choice, and the kingdom of heaven will rejoice that you have seen the truth. So that's one reason. As I have said, there are 2. And the second one comes from a personal story of mine, or at least I can illustrate it this way. You've heard many stories about when I was growing up as a young boy. I would oftentimes go down into the deep, dark parts of East Texas where my relatives lived. One of my relatives was my father's older brother. And I don't know where they got these names back in those days, but my uncle was called Uncle Pud. What kind of a name is Pud? He did chew tobacco a lot. Maybe that's where he got his name. And I used to enjoy many summers down there on his farm and that's where I learned how to plow, and that's where I learned how to do all kinds of things that you didn't learn in the city. And my father always wanted me to keep my roots in East Texas, deep East Texas. And so we go down there quite often. Well, Uncle Pud's wife was named Eula May. Another name that you don't hear too much. Eula May. Aunt Eula May. She was a sweet and wonderful woman. She just took care of the house. Everything was kind of spotless all the time, and that was hard back in deep East Texas to keep things spotless. And she was a great cook, and she would cook us breakfast, and I was just amazed. Matter of fact, I think that's where I got my first desire to be a cook, was watching her. You see, I could see how delicious her food was, and I wanted to understand everything about what she did. And you know, in those days when you sit down at breakfast in a farmer's house, they'd have eggs and bacon. But you didn't get one little egg like we do today. You got 12 eggs. All of them fried and laid out so pretty on a platter. And bacon and blood sausage. Oh, I remember that. It was such a good thing. Of course, that's probably why I have high cholesterol today. But anyway, Aunt Eula May would teach me many things. She kind of thought it was strange that I, a boy, would hang around the kitchen, but I liked watching what she did. One time she asked me, she said, would you like to shell peas with me? And I didn't even know what shelling peas meant. You know, I thought a shell was something on the ocean, you know, a shell. So anyway, we sat down and she had these green peas, and she showed me how you could split them open and shell these peas and put them into a big bowl. And it was so much fun. I enjoyed doing that. I wanted to do it all day long. It was so much fun just to do that. And then we started picking corn, which we take the corn cob and pick off the little pieces, and we put it in the bowl and stuff like that. So I learned all these things from her, and it was really great. And she was so kind to me. I just remember her. Uncle Pud, I don't remember too much, but I remember her. She was so nice to me. And one day she was in the kitchen and she said, have you ever been in my pantry, boy? Have you ever gone in my pantry? I said, no, I don't even know where your pantry is. She said, well, come on in here. I'll show you all the things I have to cook with and the things that are going on. And so she took me into this long, narrow room, and she showed me different things that she used to cook with and all the stuff that she had put in there. But I was all engaged in my mind with these jars. There was bunches of jars up on the top shelf. It had this word on them, Mason. And up there they had all these jars, and it went for one shelf and two shelves and three shelves. And every one of those jars was empty. I couldn't stand it. I had to know. Why did you put all these empty jars up there? You know, it seems like you don't have quite enough room in here. So I asked Aunt Eula May, I said, why do you have all these jars up here? And I remember her saying to me, well, boy, don't you know what those are? And I said, no, I don't know. And she said, those are pickling jars. Pickling jars. I said, well, that sounds interesting. What is a pickling jar? And then she began to explain to me that, you know, it's summertime now and it's all warm and everything's good. But she said, you know, the winter's coming. And she said, it gets real cold. And she said, when it gets real cold, we can't grow fresh vegetables out there in our garden. They didn't have a grocery store to go to. They grew everything they ate. And she said, you know, we all here love okra. And I said, oh, I love okra too. Haven't had that since I came to Ecuador. But anyway, she said, I love okra. And she said, what we do is we pickle that okra and we put it in the jars. And we pickle the green beans. And we pickle the other kinds of vegetables we have. We put them in vinegar and we let them sit there. And that preserving vinegar keeps them for us. So that when winter comes, we got something to eat. And that made a lot of sense to me. I didn't understand it because I wanted to ask her, well, why don't you just go down to the Piggly Wiggly and buy stuff? I didn't realize that they didn't have a Piggly Wiggly anywhere around that area. And so she made it plain to me. She said, you know, winter's coming and we need to stock up. Winter's coming. We need to pickle that okra if we're going to have any. And that was a lesson I learned in life. And later in my spiritual journey, that lesson began to make a lot of sense because I understood that in human relationships, winter is always coming. Let me tell you that. You might be happy with persons you know right now. You might be in a relationship where everything's all good and wonderful and everything's all happy. But let me tell you, if you're a human being and that other person's a human being, winter's coming. I don't care who you are. That coldness is coming. That anxiety and the fear is coming. All that's coming to human relationships. Anybody you know, they may be your friend today, they may be just somebody you really like and they're really great, but winter's coming to that relationship. Winter's coming to any kind of relationship between you and your children. Oh, they're really great when they're little babies and they're so nice. Winter's coming. When they get to be teenagers or beyond. Winter's coming. What you going to do? Well, if you listen to my Aunt Eula May, you'd start pickling things. And what do you pickle? You pickle your forgiveness. Now, this is a concept that has meant so much to me, and that's why on our cover today I put these words, forgiving forward. Another way of saying it would be preemptive forgiveness. The idea here is this. So many people who are human beings wait until somebody hurts them. Then they think about, maybe I should forgive them. They wait till winter gets here, and then they run out into their garden looking for okra, and there's no okra out there. It's wintertime now. You had better get your pickling jar filled up with your love for others before they hurt you, betray you, do all kinds of evil things to you. Because I'm telling you the truth, that's coming. And if you understand this great truth of forgiving forward, this great truth of understanding how it is you say to others before they sin against you, before they do anything wrong to you, you are forgiven. Huh? Think about that. You've already forgiven them before they do things that are bad. You're ahead of the ball game. You've already decided you're going to accept them unconditionally no matter what. You're going to turn the other cheek no matter how many times they slap it. You're going to look upon them kindly no matter how unkind they are. Because I'm telling you the truth, if you wait to the day when somebody hurts you, you wait to the day when somebody offends you, you wait till that time, it's going to be too late. You're not going to have any spirit of forgiveness. If you don't have it in your heart to start with, you're sure not going to have it when that hurt comes. So get your pickling jars filled up. Get that forgiving love in there. And be ready, as Jesus says. Be ready for the day when your brother or your sister or someone else sins against you. And you've already got that magnificent, wonderful, unconditional love for them to look the other way and to forgive what they are about and say, brother or sister, I don't care about what you just did to me, and I don't care about what you said to me, because I believe in what you can be and what you're going to be. And you can't say that if you wait till the last minute. You can't do it. You'll just choke on your own words. So that's the second great thing I'd like to teach you about today, or I'd like to talk about today. Oftentimes we cannot forgive because we don't practice forgiving forward. We wait until the winter is here, and then we start thinking about, oh, Jesus say I need to forgive this person, and you don't feel like it. Why? Because you don't have nothing in your jar. Nothing. So, the two things then we got to watch out for in this life, I do believe. If we're going to know the power of forgiveness in our lives, the two things we got to watch out for are these two lies. Number one, being the lie that right is better than being God, like God. That right is better than being like God. And the second one being that I can just wait to forgive people until they do something wrong to me. That is two lies that will destroy us every time. So let's get our pickling jar filled up with forgiveness, and let's understand the lie that it's better to be like God than to be right. I'd like to finish with a little story that also helps to bring up the important thing for us today. Someone sent me recently a list of these funny things that are written in church bulletins. I think all of you have seen those kinds of things. And if you've ever been a church secretary, you know how hard it is sometimes to get everything right. And one of them was really funny. I just really enjoyed reading it. This secretary must have been in a lot of hurry when she wrote this. She said, this Saturday, don't forget, we're having a garbage sale. I meant to say garage sale. So be sure and bring everything you want to get rid of, including your husband's. She meant bring your husband, and it was a garage sale, but you got it all tangled up. Well, let me tell you the truth. Here is a place we do have a garbage sale, and we ask you to bring your garbage here every Sunday. You need to bring your ego here. Nail it up You need to bring your selfishness here and nail it up there. You need to bring your pride that, oh, I'm so right. Even God has to look the other way. Nail that up here. And remember that you need to be full of forgiveness and empty of animosity. So bring your animosity, bring your grudges, and nail them up there. And be filled with grace. And then you can go out into this world to start the forgiveness revolution. That's what I call it. You can go out into this world to say, if we're ever going to be anything as humanity, if we're ever going to go anywhere, if we're ever going to know the kingdom of God, we have got to learn how to live the forgiving forever life, the forward forgiving life, the life that says, this is the way I've been treated, and this is the way I'm going to treat others. That's what we have to do. That's exactly what Jesus meant when He told us this story and said, through the man in the story, if God has so forgiven you, should not you forgive one another? Amen.